everyone. Welcome to another episode of What's New in Prisma. I'm Tasin. I am a developer advocate at Prisma, and I am joined today with Niko, one of my esteemed colleagues. And today we will be going over Prisma's release 4.5.0. We also have a demo about using Prisma with Deno, which is the hot new runtime for JavaScript and TypeScript that all the cool kids are using.
Indeed.
And we have a talk with Chris from AdminJS, who is going to tell us about AdminJS along with the cool Prisma integration they have been working on. And yeah, Niko, just how are you doing? How are you feeling today?
I'm doing great. And especially after you've now enumerated all of the different things that we're talking about today on the stream, I'm even more excited about it, especially looking forward to the Deno part, I have to say, since I know that a lot of people have been waiting for that eagerly. I think the Deno support in Prisma was one of the most popular feature requests that we had in the Prisma repo. And then also very curious about Chris's demo of AdminJS, I have to say. I've heard some things about the tool. I haven't seen it myself, so having it explained in person from someone from the team sounds like the perfect introduction. So yes, sounds great. I'm really looking forward to everything that we're doing today.
Awesome. So how has your week been, by the way?
It was great so far. There was a conference here in Berlin that I attended to give a talk on Tuesday. It was the Serverless Architecture Conference. To be honest, it was not quite the vibe that I'm used to from developer conferences. It felt a little bit more enterprisey. So a very different vibe compared to a React Conf or a Next.js Conf or something like this. But I still had a lot of fun. And I also gave a talk there on Tuesday about scaling database connections in a serverless world. It was a 45-minute talk. So I had to think of some things that would spice it up a little bit, because I don't think that this is a topic that people can necessarily endure for 45 minutes without falling asleep. So I integrated an interactive quiz, and two people actually won a signed copy of the Designing Data-Intensive Applications book that we're also handing out as prizes at our meetups regularly.
Yeah, that book.
All right, and you also went to the conference on Wednesday, right? You also attended for one day.
Yeah, I did. It was pretty good. So it was actually my first live conference, because I'm as you can see, pretty young, and when I was started getting interested in conferences, COVID started and everything just went remote. So this was the first time I had the opportunity to go to one live, and it was actually pretty fun and really interesting, just meeting random people, just learning about what they're working on, what they do, their backgrounds. There was people different companies, the sponsors, their booths, just getting to know them, and getting free swag. That's also was a really fun thing. So yeah, it was pretty good.
What you mentioned in the beginning there is also typically the point that I enjoy the most about developer conferences and also meetups, to just talk about people and learn about their favorite tech stack and what they're working with, and their workflows and frictions. I think it's always that's a question that you can always ask any developer, and they can essentially start talking about this for half an hour to just kind of describe their daily workflows. How do they deploy? How do they introduce schema changes? How do they query their database? What kind of other tools are they using in their stack? So for introverts at conferences, or if you don't know how to start a conversation at the lunch table at a conference, the one question that you can always ask: what's your stack, and what do your workflows look like when you're building a production application with your team? I think these two questions are always great icebreakers, and I love to ask them because it's also always insightful to hear this first-hand developer experience from other people.
Yeah, that's a pretty good life hack. Yeah, I'll keep that in mind next time.
Only works for developers, though.
Yeah, it's a developer version of what's your favorite Pokemon.
Yeah, exactly.
So we should head over to the next section, where we will go over the release notes for 4.5.0 and just talk about all the cool features and improvements. So do we do the transition for this as well?
Yes, let's take a little break and then we'll see everybody here for the release notes.
All right, and 3, 2, 1. And we're back.
Very smooth.
Yes, that went pretty well. All right, so 4.5.0 hit 2 days ago, and we have a bunch of cool new changes and improvements. So the first one I want to share is for filter. So it's a bit of a mouthful. Filter for non-unique properties in unique where queries. Okay, gosh, what does that actually mean? Um, so previously in Prisma, when you wanted to make queries that had to identify some record uniquely, so for example, this article record, let's say you want to find a single article, you would use the find unique query. And in such cases, you'd have to use these unique fields in the where clause. So concretely, like to be a bit more concrete about it, in this article model, the ID is unique. So any article record will only have any specific article record will have a unique ID, but the content and version may or may not be unique across different records. So if you ran a query like find unique, you would have to specify inside the where clause only unique records. You could not specify any kind of non-unique field of the record. So this version field would not work for any of the previous releases of Prisma. But after talking to our users and getting lots of feedback, we realized that certain use cases, you don't just want to query by the unique field, you also want some of the non-unique fields. So for example, here you only want to update this article with ID of 5 if the version is 1. And previously this was not possible because Prisma would complain that the version field is non-unique. You can't put it inside update or find unique or delete or whatever. But now it's possible with 4.5.0 with this new preview feature, which is called extended where unique. And to get it working, you just need to add this feature flag. And again, it's all documented. You can check it out.
Nice.
For
Yeah, I
more
like that
info.
explanation. And also the example that's used here in the release notes to illustrate this feature, I think is also really helpful. Because to be honest, when I first heard saw an internal conversation about this feature on Slack a couple of weeks ago, like I was really confused because I thought like, why would you need an extra property to filter by in a unique query anyways? Because you know that this one unique property is going to identify only one record. So why would you even want additional fields in there? But it can be that you just have further constraints for that query, right? You do want to find only a unique record, but only if it actually matches additional filter criteria as well. So yeah, your explanation I think was really helpful, and also this example illustrates it well for everybody who had still trouble understanding that before. I hope also that clarifies it as it did for me.
Yeah, and inside our documentation, we actually list a few use cases where this might come in handy. So like optimistic concurrency control, so soft deletes. So so again, just check out the documentation if you want even more, if you want to dig deeper into this. All right, so the next feature that we released is extension management in Postgres. So to give a quick TLDR of what this is, Postgres supports various kinds of extensions for adding additional capabilities to your database that are not baked in by default. So one of the really well-known ones is PostGIS or PostGIS. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Another allows you to do case insensitive search. I think it's called like CI text, something like that. So previously, if you were using these extensions with Postgres, Prisma would not really know about them, and you would have to manually create migrations so that they work and play well alongside your Prisma migrations, and you'd have to write the SQL for that manually. But now your schema can recognize these extensions, and they can be documented and be very declarative inside your schema. And to use them, you add this Postgres SQL extensions feature flag, and then you can have a new extensions property in your data source where you mention all the extensions that you're using. And this also plays well with migrations now, so you don't have to manually mess around with your migrations, and the migrations kind of work as you're used to them for other aspects of your migration workflows. You can introspect, you can run migrations and make changes, etc. So there is one important clarification. So largely what we're supporting right now is support for these extensions in the schema and in migrations. The Prisma generated client does not have dedicated data types for some of the capabilities some of these extensions add. For example, if you were to use PostGIS, that would add a bunch of new data types that Prisma client does not know about. So while yes, you can use Prisma with PostGIS, you can use this new feature to add it to your schema and everything, but you would still not be able to run queries using the Prisma client for like spatial queries and such. And those will hopefully come at a later date, and they have to be a bit more specific to the extension. So we'd have to add extension specific capabilities into the Prisma client.
Yeah. So this preview feature here is basically also just the first step towards proper extension support for a lot of people, right? Like as you said, they can't use the auto-generated native Prisma client queries, but they can still query using the query raw method from Prisma client, right? They can still send raw SQL queries to the database with PostGIS functions. But like at this point, this feature only defines the extension in the database in the current schema, but it doesn't give you the querying capabilities yet.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So yeah, let's move on to our next feature, which is a change to referential integrity. So referential integrity is this Prisma feature that is basically allows you to emulate referential integrity or relations as it works in the database. There's not a lot of notable changes to the feature in terms of functionality, more so that we are changing the name of this feature. We're changing the name from referential integrity to relation mode. And the data, like there's a data source property that was previously called referential integrity that's also being changed to relation mode. However, the preview feature flag itself is still called referential integrity, and this might be a bit confusing because like it took me like a bit of time to just understand what is being changed and what isn't. But it's more so that the change is like a gradual process, and we don't want to break everything immediately and whatnot. So the feature flag itself is still called referential integrity. But just to summarize, the property or feature itself is being renamed, and the data source property is also being renamed.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And again, more information in the documentation, but another major change is one of the behaviors that we used to previously support is no longer supported because we want to like emulate the database more truly. And again, that's also, you can find more information about this in the documentation. Yeah, okay, so the next feature we want to talk about is support for Deno with Prisma. So if you don't know what Deno is, it's this cool new runtime for JavaScript and TypeScript. And it is actually created by Ryan Dahl, the person who originally developed Node. And so it's Node and Deno, while they're both basically JavaScript, TypeScript runtimes, there are some differences between them. And not everything in the Node ecosystem is compatible with Deno. There's differences in the API, the way they're structured, the permission system, package management, and all of that. And previously, you couldn't really use Prisma with Deno, at least that to the extent that I know. Now we are adding very like experimental support. It's still in a very like bare bones stage. You can only use it with the data proxy. So what that means is you'd have to use the Prisma Cloud to generate a data proxy for your Deno application when you're using it with Prisma. But support is here, and you can definitely mess around with it and just get a feel for it. And that's something we're also going to be showing as a demo in the next section of our of the stream.
Super nice.
Yeah, so finally we also have some small changes in the Prisma Studio, basically the data browser. There was a bug that a lot of people are facing that has been fixed. And we updated our proposal for client extensions. So Prisma Client Extensions is this cool new proposal that would allow you to basically modify the capabilities of the Prisma client and the models, so you can so that you can like make changes to the models. You can add new functionality, add new behavior, and do all of this in a sort of type safe way. And we previously had a proposal that was released along with 4.3, I believe, and we received a lot of great feedback, and we have created a new proposal based on the updated feedback. And yeah, you can check our new proposal. It's linked with the release notes, and if you have any suggestions for us, we'd really appreciate it. And finally, we have some fixes and improvements. And again, thanks to all the contributors who helped with this release. And yeah, that's kind of it for changes in 4.5.
All right, that was a great list and a great overview. Thank you, Tasin. So what's next on the agenda?
We are going to move to the Deno demo. So let's do the cool transition thing again.
All right. Deno. I think it's all about Deno now.
Yes. So yeah. Right. So what we're going to show you is how to use Deno with Prisma, and we are going to make a quick, very basic web application that just has like one endpoint, and we are going to show you how you can use that and with the data proxy with Prisma, and also like how to deploy it to Deno deploy. And yeah, so let's just kind of get started. The first thing you need to do that I've already done is have Deno installed, and the instructions for that is available on the Deno website. I'll also link it somewhere in the chat later so that you can do that. Also, I have this project already started. It's empty, but I have the Deno extension installed already. Yeah, so that's pretty much all I've done in terms of preparation. Except, also there's a few other things. I'll get to that in the middle of the stream. But yeah, anyways, that's all you need to kind of get started. Install Deno and install the VS Code extension or whatever ID you're using. Probably like if the popular ones already have some kind of support. So the first thing I'm going to do is initialize Prisma, and the normal syntax for that is usually npx prisma init. But since we're no longer in Node land, we're in Deno land, we're going to have to modify this command a little bit. So we're going to put Deno run. And so the A means give all permission so that Prisma can kind of do whatever it wants. And unstable, I guess, speaks for itself. So npm Prisma. So we want to use pull Prisma from npm, and we want to run the init command. And yeah, so this does basically what Prisma init is supposed to do, which is it generates a schema.prisma file, a .env, and a git ignore. The next step is we are going to update the client. First, we need to add a new preview feature, and this will be called Deno. And finally, we also need to specify the output of where the client will be generated. This is necessary for Deno. Yeah, okay, so the data source is all fine, and we are going to add a model. And it's a very bare bones, simple kind of model. It's a log model that has a few basic properties like level, message, and metadata, and an ID field. So yeah, this is just going to like generate log records in the database. We are also going to need to create a schema. We're also going to need to allocate the databases, and we can't do that locally because we're going to be using the data proxy. I have already done that in Heroku, and I am just going to copy paste the credentials. And feel free to steal my database if you would like. They're free tiers, they're like 10 megabytes, and Heroku is going to kill them in a month or so anyway. So go nuts. Yeah, so we have two databases, one for the storing data, another as a shadow database for running migrations. Yeah, okay. So with that out of the way, we are going to run migrations.
For the shadow database, I think you have to specify it in the data source block as well, though, right?
Yes,
and actually
we do.
Pointed to that.
Yeah, we do. So we need to do. I forgot what it's called.
Shadow DB URL, I think, but you can also double check. And like, I'm also wondering why you don't get autocompletion when you're trying to type that, because it should autocomplete.
I think there's something wrong with my VS Code or something.
Some issues in there. Okay, no problem. But I think it was shadow DB URL. There it goes. And now it also catches the comma. I actually wondered if at some point it would catch it, but there you go.
Oh, right. Yeah, here we go.
Now you have
much better. Yeah, shadow database URL. Okay. So now what we are going to do is run npx prisma migrate, but basically the Deno version, which is Deno run a stable npm prisma migrate dev.
So when we want to run the Deno commands in the terminal instead of, or the Prisma commands in the terminal, instead of prefixing them with npx as we usually do, we now have to prefix them with this command from Deno. So the Deno CLI, there is a run command of the Deno CLI, and then we pass. I think you mentioned about these flags, that it's just because we are like setting permissions. And then we're invoking the Prisma migrate dev just from the npm repo directly, right? We haven't installed this locally.
Yeah, so Deno has a different package resolution system. There's it does not need node modules or package.json. Like, for example, in Node, normally what happens is you specify a bunch of packages, and you run npm install, and it installs them in your node modules folder. But with Deno, you can just kind of it manages all of this internally, and it does not necessarily explicitly need a node modules folder.
Mhm.
That being said, there is some compatibility related things, and for example, with Prisma, it did generate a node modules for you and a package JSON. And some of this stuff is like when this is needed or when it's not. I'm not super clear on either. I'm also very new to Deno, so I will
all of this is
probably
very
leave that.
early. We can remind people that all of this is very early. We are working together with the Deno team on these features. So we're also kind of very relying on user feedback from now going forward, and want to learn from everybody who's excited about Deno, who's willing to try it out in combination with Prisma, what the friction points are that you encounter, what the problems are, what errors you run into. And please, please, please go to GitHub and create the issues with an error report of the things that you're running into. That helps us tremendously.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, again, so Deno has some, like, the package resolution system is just somewhat different from Node, and it's not necessary that you get packages from npm, but you can. And here, that's exactly what we're doing. We're just saying, like, pull this package from npm and run migrate dev. And Deno internally maintains some kind of cache, so it's not like doing it for every time I run this. It's pulled at Prisma the first time, but as far as I understand, unless you explicitly tell it to reload a package, it's not going to. So yeah, okay. So the next command we need to run is generate the client, but for the data proxy. So by default, a client was generated, but this is the library version. This is not what we want. So again, Deno run stable npm prisma generate data proxy. So right, we just generated a new Prisma client, and this time it's a data proxy version instead of the library version. Okay, so far we've only really just started Prisma. Next, what we're going to do is test the application locally. So let's create an index.ts file. Okay, so first we are going to import two modules. One is unable to load. Interesting. Okay, so sorry. So the first is this HTTP serve thing that it's basically just a module that allows you to create a very rudimentary web server. And we have also imported the Prisma client, and this might be like in like just some. Yeah, let me
I know
just
it's
try
declared,
and.
but its value is never read. I think once you instantiate. No, actually it was the warning. I think yeah, you're right. The red squiggly lines are something else.
Did I do something wrong? Generated client.
You migrated. You have this path.
Yeah. What is the difference? No, I don't think there's.
What if you remove node modules? Just the old trick. Maybe it's also working on Deno.
Okay, let's just.
I saw this work before, and if people don't believe us, they can go through the tutorial, which I already dropped in the comments. But this is indeed curious. Please check the file path.
That file path looks good. Oh no, the demo gods are not with us today.
But is it? Because generated has a client, but in there I don't see a Deno. Okay. Actually, I have one suspicion, Tasin. I think that you might have misspelled preview features inside of the Prisma schema because you only wrote preview feature. And actually, I would expect red squiggly lines if that's indeed the error, but I'm pretty sure this is called preview features. And maybe that's why it generated the wrong version. So let's see.
Yeah, there you
Now
go.
Deno's in there. All right.
Yeah, so that was probably like some VS Code issue. I think I downloaded too many random shady extensions and VS Code
Overwhelmed
has
VS
gone
Code.
crazy. Yeah. But yeah, thank you for that. That was very astute of you. Yeah, so now we are back. And yeah, so we basically have this server ready. And now what we need to do is you get the data proxy running because we can't use the client locally with Deno yet. So that's the next step. So to do that, we are going to go to GitHub. Oh, and just before we do that, just to clarify what we did here, we initialized Prisma. We have this handler function, and it's this very basic like sort of endpoint definition that just creates an entry into the log model and returns that same data as a response. And that's pretty much all it does. So the next step is we will go to cloud.prisma.io, which is basically Prisma Cloud, where you can create projects. Sorry. We need to do one more thing, which is push this repository to GitHub first, because that's how you can kind of connect it to Prisma Cloud. So let's init, git add, commit. Okay, so we created a commit. We'll create a repository on GitHub. I'm using the GitHub command line tool. Call this Deno demo, description, public, add a remote, origin. Yeah, Git push was kind of slow today, a few hours ago. And let's see how long
maybe
it takes.
like very quickly recap all the steps that you have gone through. So you started out very much from scratch with Deno. You installed Prisma inside of the project. You then defined a Prisma schema and ran a migration against the database that you connected via Prisma. The database is hosted on Heroku. Then you had the table inside of the database, and you wanted to now access this table from your application code using Prisma Client. So you implemented this function inside of index.ts. We haven't ran this. We didn't run it locally yet. But what you're doing now is you're deploying this via Deno deploy, and for that it needs to be inside of a GitHub. Actually, no, sorry. I was one step ahead. You're putting this now into a GitHub repo because you want to set up the Prisma data proxy. And the Prisma data proxy requires the Prisma schema file, and it fetches it from GitHub. So you need to connect the data proxy to a GitHub repo in order to be able to use it. That's why you're now at the GitHub repo stage. After that, we'll see the data proxy that you integrate into the project here via an env, and then we can deploy or even run.
Exactly. Locally. Yeah. So lots of steps. You can see we get confused ourselves. So totally fine if you're having a hard time following. Yeah, so we basically have the repo in GitHub now, and I can quickly just show you. It should create. Yeah, so Deno demo, what's new in Prisma. And we are going to just import this into Prisma Cloud just as soon as I can find it. Yeah, okay. So cloud.prisma.io, I've already logged in. I'm just going to create a new project.
Deno demo.
It's a nice tongue twister. I have the Deno demo.
Or is it the Deno demo?
I have a Deno demo running on Deno something. Yeah, anyways, Deno demo. this is the project name. We are going to import from a repository. It's called demo what's new in Prisma. And I already have some permission set up, so it's not asking for anything right now. This was your first time using Prisma Cloud. It might ask you to give access to GitHub. Yeah, okay, so I'll just go to the next step, and we'll need to provide the connection string, and that is available here. Connection string disabled. Yeah, okay, so and now it just gave me a data proxy connection string, which we will be using shortly. And I'll just copy this, and I will add this database proxy. So, and I will continue. So now the project is ready, and we're in the data browser. As you can see, there's no real data in the database yet. I'm going back to VS Code because the data proxy has been enabled. I'm going to need to make one quick change to the URL, because we are going to use the data proxy URL now for running the application. You know what? I'm just going to rename this. Yeah, okay, so this is the database URL. Yeah, okay, that's should be clear.
Mhm.
We're using the new proxy URL instead of the direct Postgres database URL.
Mhm.
And now what we can do is just run this application even locally. So before we do that, we need to install .env CLI. So the .env CLI is necessary when we're using the data proxy, because the connection string is not automatically picked up from .env. So yeah, again, all it's going to do is just read this .env file and pull up all the environment variables. That's really it. And the way we run it is, yeah, npx.env and then deno run index.ts. Okay, so localhost 8000 is already in use. Let me just quickly kill whatever is running there. Yeah, still in use. That's interesting. Yeah, I can just change the port number.
Yeah, in our demo before you used 3000, I think that worked. What's
Yeah,
there
there's
at 8000?
some evil demon running in 8000 refuses to die. So
It's not so easy to kill that one.
yeah. So our application is running on localhost 3000, and I just went there, and as you can see, yeah, so the log gets printed. This record was generated for us, and we can also see this in the data browser, hopefully. Yeah. Okay, so now I kind of have to give a disclaimer. All of this is very buggy, and for whatever reason, we have 2 records, even though I touched the endpoint once. And you can see in the code as well that we're only creating 1 record. But for whatever reason, 2 records are being created. And all of this is to say this is all super new. It's preview features. You really have to use like a big, scary, unstable flag when you're running it with Deno. And what I'm trying to get at is, don't use this in production. It will all blow up in your face. This is more for like exploration and to get your feel for it. And I have no idea why this is happening. I'll create an issue for it soon, and we'll probably be able to figure it out in a version or 2. Yeah, so that's kind of how the application works. We have it running locally right now, and the command we used is just deno run, which is just equivalent to node index.ts. And we had to use this npx.env to read the .env files. We can also deploy this. We are going to use the dedicated Deno dedicated like Deno launch platform called Deno Deploy, and let's just go to Deno Deploy. Deno Deploy. Yeah, I will sign in. Okay, I've already kind of signed in before, and I will create a new project. Yeah. So Deno demo. What's new in Prisma? We select the main branch. We do automatic deployments. We mention index.ts as the application entry point. We need to add an environment variable, which is the database URL. And pulling that up real quick.
So the .env CLI that you installed, and also putting the data proxy URL into the .env file was really only to be able to run it locally, right? Because here, when we deploy, the database URL will be set dynamically by the deployment provider, in this case, Deno. So they don't care about our local.env files.
Of course, yeah. And the local.env file isn't also committed, so no way for them to get it either way. So yeah, so now we click on link, and it's deploying. Packaging complete. All right. And here we go. We have the application running on Deno demo. Deno demo in Deno dev. Yeah, so again, weird bug. We increment by 2 all the time. I have no idea why that's happening. But we'll figure it out. And yeah, you can see the records in the data browser as well. And yeah, that's it for the demo. And again,
that was a great.
Yeah, sorry, continue.
That was a great overview, Tasin. I learned a lot also in the last couple of days and weeks, actually, hearing our engineers talk about Deno and also getting in touch with the Deno team. There was one question in the chat. I don't fully get it, but I think we can figure it out together. So this person asked, can you show how to change the package JSON so when you deploy, the env database URL sees the actual DB and not the data proxy from Prisma? I asked for elaboration, and they clarified a little bit that they mean this command, the migrate deploy script, I guess. That's a script that's defined in in the package file. And I think they're talking about an issue that we also talked before about, and that's that you have to always be aware which command is pointing to which environment variable, right? Because you can't run Prisma migrate against the data proxy URL. You always have to run Prisma migrate against the regular database URL. So maybe in your project, Tasin, you could quickly clarify again, maybe which one was which URLs. And then I don't know if we can figure out this specific command here. I think they got this from the data proxy docs. But I think maybe there can be a simpler setup than just using all of these different environment variables here in the script.
You generally have to do this, unfortunately. But yeah, let's just quickly go through what we did and like what the nuances here are. So we basically have. I'll just go back to this state because it makes more sense.
Yeah, and people should ignore, by the way, the shadow data, or actually, I mean, yeah, it depends on where your database is hosted, but you can actually ignore for the issue of the data proxy. This is not relevant. You can just pretend it not being there, and you just work with one database, and the shadow databases then they're created under the hood. But we don't want to make this more complex than it has to be.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so for the context of the data proxy itself, we have 2 URLs. One is for the directly to the database, another is to the data proxy. And unfortunately, we need both. We need the database URL for running migrations because the proxy does not do that as of yet. So for introspection and migration, you'll need to use a direct database URL. But when you're running queries with the Prisma data proxy, you'll need to use the proxy connection string. And currently, unfortunately, it's a bit confusing because you can't, like, for example, with Shadow databases, you can just specify a separate URL. But for when you're using the proxy, you can do it like a query URL and a migrate URL or whatnot. So what Osage, the user, suggested is basically like creating a script where you manually kind of inject the migrate database URL. So let's say if we have, like, we call this the migrate database URL. So basically you prefix the Prisma migrate command with this environment injection kind of thing, where you manually specify that the database URL is equal to the value at migrate database URL. So the database URL, even though it's in the in file, it will get overwritten when this is done. And when Prisma migrate deploy is run in the context of that command, the migrate URL becomes the database URL, and you can kind of work as expected. Of course, it would be kind of different. This would be the migrate URL, and this would be the database URL, because the migrate is the one that's pointing directly to the database. And by default, we'll be using the database URL, which is the proxy URL. Slightly confusing, but would that clarify things a bit or just make it more confusing? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it makes it a little bit more clear. But Ose, if you still have an issue here, then please go and create an issue or a new GitHub discussion. Actually, I just dropped the link to that in the comments. That's the best place where you can find help about Prisma. Just like share some details about your issue. And then our support engineers can help you there. And also always feel free to take the link to that GitHub discussion and drop it in our Slack to raise attention. Maybe someone in there is able to help you as well. So feel free to use our Slack and GitHub discussion as further points of information when you need them.
All right. Yeah, okay, so we can move on to the next section of our show, where we will be talking with Chris from AdminJS. So if you're ready, Chris, we are going to pull you up on stage very soon. So yeah, without further ado, let's take a short break.
Hey, hello. It's Chris. Hey, guys.
Chris, nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice
Hey,
to meet
Chris.
you too. Hi. How is it going? Seen your presentation, Tasin. It's great that you starting off Deno, right? Or using Deno. It's a great tool, but at the pretty early stage right now.
Yeah, of course.
It's all the bleeding edge.
Yes. It's great that you're testing out stuff, and that's amazing.
It's a pretty fun thing. It has a lot of like nice tooling that reminds me of like the more modern languages like Go and stuff, and it's really nice that comes with a formatter. You can create a single executable. Pretty cool stuff.
Exactly. All right. I wanted to tell you something about AdminJS, which is basically a library, an open source library for building the administration applications over the databases that you provide. So we recently added Prisma support to AdminJS. So AdminJS is a library that basically takes the database and ORM and transforms it into a beautiful UI for the data operations and create crude operations UI. We do have more than 10,000 downloads weekly on NPM. We do have a lot of support on GitHub as well. So yeah,
that sounds amazing. I'm really looking forward to seeing the workflows and how to set it up and how it integrates with Prisma and other tools. But
Sure.
like it integrates only on the database layer, right? Or is it relevant what kind of framework I'm using on top of it? Is it relevant whether I'm using Nest or Express or GraphQL? Does that play any role?
Okay, so the aim of AdminJS is actually make it as customizable or as flexible as possible. And what we do is we do support multiple, like 6 different frameworks. I believe it includes Nest.js, Express, Koa, which is pretty cool as well. And we do support multiple ORMs and ODM solutions, Prisma included. We do have support for Mongoose, type ORM, and different stuff. And like our aim is to make it as simple as possible. So let me show you a quick intro on how to integrate with Prisma. I'll try to do it as good as Tasin did with Deno, but
yeah, with a lot of bugs, just like me.
Yeah, let's hope it's gonna be not that buggy in my case. All right.
Screen.
Let's go here. So, all right. So I prepared a little demo. So I prepared the code not to bore you with writing here, but what I have in here is basically a short, very simple application using Prisma. I got a database. Set up here, so you can check. We do have 3 tables, post, profile, users, as you have. You probably have it in your tutorial, right? So that's the example straight from your tutorial. What we have in here is a Prisma schema. As you show, you're probably all familiar with that. And what we want to add over the Prisma schema, we actually want to have a quick UI, like an administration applications for adding different user profiles and posts to our database and save them somewhere. So actually, to create AdminJS application, you need only 20 lines of code. So that's there is a full tutorial in our documentation. So if you go to docs.adminjs.com, I can show it later as well. We have the code here, and what you do, we basically set up the Express app and add the AdminJS library to it with the router and make admin use make application the Express app use AdminJS and start it. So when I start the application, let's go here. When I start the application in TypeScript, so good to say that AdminJS is a Node.js framework, Node.js library, and totally written, like wholly written in TypeScript. So let's go to it should be here. So if you see, we have a beautiful UI without any integration yet, so we cannot access the database yet. So what we're going to do now is basically add the support for Prisma. So as I said, we do have a Prisma schema right here, and what we have here is another application. And there's a second application, so basically a little bit extended version of the first one, where I added the Prisma client, which is this DMF thing. I also added the Prisma plugin here. So imported the Prisma plugin, added the Prisma client, and everything. And this is actually the code of our whole application here. So basically, what you have to add is only initialize the Prisma client and add the options for AdminJS to know. So add the options for AdminJS to know where to look for the different models. Exactly. Okay. And if we run this, let's run the second app. And the second application, let's refresh it here. Okay, so we do have access to the posts, profiles, and users, as you can see right here. So it does the UI representation of our database. what we can do, what AdminJS allows you to do actually, is create new records. Here's my example. And yeah, it supports the relationships in the database. So it gives you the way of choosing the different stuff and things. So we do have our Prisma example here. It also gives the ability to filter out the records in the database, and there's a lot more. Everything's described in our documentation. Not sure if we want to go through everything here in this call.
One thing I'd be interested in is, since you integrate with a lot of these frameworks, as you mentioned before, with Nest, with Express, like what does admin like give you in terms of functionality specific to these frameworks?
Specific to the frameworks.
Yeah. So, for example, if I use Nest.js, what else is admin will AdminJS be able to do for me?
Okay, so AdminJS actually works over is an additional thing over the framework, over the framework, and it generates auto-generates the UI that I've presented, so you don't have to write it yourself. So the main benefit of using AdminJS is actually the speed up of the development.
I see. It's the data management basically in my data source.
Exactly. The main use case for AdminJS. So the main use case we see in our how our users use AdminJS is to basically build back office applications over it, or the applications for the clients over it, by providing simple CRUD solutions. So we see that people are using AdminJS for CMS, for their e-commerce websites, to manage the how is it called? The shipments and everything, for the SaaS products as well. So they build things over it without the need of building the UI themselves, right? So AdminJS, what it provides, what it gives over the frameworks, over the databases, it gives the full design system, the backend that actually translates the schema and translates the different schemas, different databases to something that UI understands, right? To the REST format that we provide, and yeah, that's basically it. And it's straightforward to use. It's basically single.
It reminds me a lot of Django admin in the
Exactly.
Python ecosystem.
Exactly. So yeah, the main reason AdminJS was created is that we were missing Django admin in Node.js. So
All right.
it's exactly how we created it, how it was created, and exactly the reason for it to be created.
Nice.
I see.
All right. I don't
Seems very cool, and it's very nice that it's very like the integration is very effortless. It's not like you have to do a lot of things to get it configured, kind of like Django admin.
Yeah. Additional thing we're currently working on in AdminJS. So what we want to do now is we want to provide kind of a full experience for the developers, kind of take as much burden of creating the application as we can from them. And we do also work on something similar that you showed in Deno. So the cloud version of AdminJS, where you can basically create your deploy your applications with a single command. But that's something that will be that we actively work on now, and we'll introduce it in the near future.
Very nice.
Wait for it.
Sounds very exciting.
Okay. Yep. Cool. So I guess that's it with the demo. I can come back to the. Sorry for that.
Yeah, we can just right. We
Stop
can just
share.
remove. Right.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. So Chris, the Prisma integration is relatively new in AdminJS, correct?
Exactly. It gets a few months, but we still make it we still polish it and make it and work on it and support it. So if you have any questions or anything about the Prisma integration, about the AdminJS itself, so we do have a Slack community. If you can join it and ask the questions there, we do have a GitHub repositories for that and everything. So that should work and should be should
of course.
work and should answer all the questions you have and everything. If not, you can also find us on Twitter and find us on Reddit as well. So if you ask questions there, we'll answer them as well.
And I'll just quickly mention the AdminJS website, so if people can find it more easily, it's adminjs.co. And
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's on the chat.
Yeah. It will work out, and it will make it easier to develop great stuff, right? And make it easier to develop to create great products, and great things.
Definitely, it looks really nice.
Awesome. Cool.
So Niko, do you have any more questions for Chris?
I don't have any other questions. I think that was a great overview, and thank you so much for joining.
Yeah. Thanks, guys, and see you then.
All right, Chris. Well, have a nice day. Thank you for joining us.
Bye.
And we are in for another transition. And we're back.
Very cool demo of AdminJS. I really like this tool.
Yeah, it's very effortless to use. That seems really nice. It also is somewhat similar to Prisma Studio, but it connects to like other tools as well. So you can use it with like a bunch of other tools in the ecosystem and framework. So yeah, very interesting.
All right, what else do we have on today's agenda, Tasin?
All right, so we want to quickly run over a few new things that's happening in the Prisma world. So what we have since the last released 2 new blog articles, and I will just share my screen again real quick. Yeah. So the first article that was written by me, it talks about using database metrics with Prisma, Prometheus, and Grafana. So some of you might know that we released a new feature called metrics a few releases ago. I think it was 4 or so releases ago, 5 releases ago. And what metrics allows you to do is get a lot of detailed insights into what your database is doing and like quantifying a lot of things about the performance, the state of the connections, the latencies, all that kind of stuff. So the tutorial kind of goes over how to use Prisma metrics to create a very beautiful monitoring system and a dashboard that with Prometheus and Grafana. And yeah, it kind of looks like what you can just quickly see in the GIF. So yeah, it's definitely something that you should check out if you're interested in like observability or monitoring, or just want to like know more and get more under the hood information about what Prisma is doing. So the tutorial is available on our blog, and we also have another article which goes over hash indexes. and this is part of a series of tutorials on different indexes that our colleague Alex is doing. And yeah, it's definitely, if you're more interested in learning about like the bit of the more theoretical side of how databases work, this is definitely something worth checking out. It goes over what hash indexes are, also why or when you would want to use hash indexes. So yeah, again, it's available in our blog. Definitely check it out if you're interested. Yeah, sorry, Nico, I think I interrupted you.
And the last thing that I just quickly wanted to draw some attention to, I'll drop the link to that in the chat, is a project from one of our community members, Grab and Go Prisma schemas. It's basically just a website that's at the same time a repository for some examples of Prisma schemas. And initially you can find there all of the schemas from the real world example projects that are built on top of Prisma. There is cal.com, which is an alternative to Calendly. There is an alternative to Heroku. There is a form builder, so alternative to Typeform. Lots of interesting tools, actually. And I think it's definitely worth checking out and to explore all of these schemas to find out how other people model their applications.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a great place to get inspired or just get an idea of like what a real world application with Prisma looks like, because we're often in our demos and examples using really simple CRUD kind of things. And this is mainly to avoid complexity. But if you just want to learn more, like these real world examples are a great way to like just explore and get a feel for what more complex situations and stuff look like. So yeah, definitely check it out. We'll also have two more things to just quickly mention. So one is we'd love to get feedback on all the preview features that we have talked about in about this release, along with some of the other preview features like metrics. And these features are in preview so that you can test them out, give us your feedback on how they work, what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, how we can improve. So we really value user input, and we really appreciate when you give us valuable suggestions. So please go to the Prisma GitHub repo, and you can just like Google it, feedback, preview features, and you'll be able to find it, but also link it in the chat so that you can check it out. And this links to, oops, I double posted because, yeah, but yeah, again, just check it out. Feel free to leave a comment in any of these issues. Also, the last thing I wanted to mention is that we are going to a few conferences. So we'll be available in React Advanced London. That's happening tomorrow. I believe our colleague Sabin will be there at the Prisma booth. He also gave a workshop at React Advanced a few days ago. And we are also going to attend International JavaScript Conference that's happening in Munich next week. And if you happen to be at the conference, definitely come by our booth, because I'll be there along with Nico, Sabin, Alex. The entire Prisma developer advocacy team will be at the conference. So definitely swing by.
Amazing.
Yeah, so that's kind of it for our show. I think we have run quite long today. It's an hour and 10 minutes. Yeah, I'll just close my screen share. Do we have any questions that we have not yet answered?
There was one quick question, I think, here from Wes Kobe, whether the search feature is available in 4.5 or still in preview. I think they're referring to full text search, and the bad news here is that it's still running in preview, so still not released for GA. But that was all the questions that I could find.
All right. Well, Nico, thank you for joining me in the stream, and thanks for all the viewers for hanging around. Well, it was great fun, and hopefully we'll see you again in 3 weeks.
Thank you, Tasin. And thanks everybody else. Bye.